are isolated at their homes, and generally the people are living in a nuclear family, so they don't have people in the family itself to interact.
But a 14-year-old will question you a lot. Here, it is very important as parents to first build a connect with the child. Start looking at all the positive things that your son has done.
I think Parentune has this wonderful concept of called Parentune Live workshops, where they understand that what is that they are undergoing.
So it is very important for child to listen a lot.
इतना समय हम इस पे बिताएंगे, इतना समय ये करने में बिताएंगे, थोड़ा बहुत ये स्ट्रक्चर लाना बहुत जरूरी है.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Parentune Live. I today have Dr. Sandhya with me, and Dr. Sandhya, my first question to you is about herd immunity. What is herd immunity? And as you understand herd immunity, if you can just detail that out, like decipher it for us, because there's a lot of this chat in India about India already has developed herd immunity for COVID. So if you can explain us herd immunity and then tell us more about it.
Hi, Nitin. So herd immunity refers to when a high proportion of the population is protected from, a circulating bacteria or virus, because there's a high proportion of the population that has gained immunity through vaccination, generally speaking. And so basically what that means is that the virus is unable to find non-immune people to keep on infecting. And so that is when you have herd immunity. They call it herd because it's not generally possible to vaccinate every single person in a population. For example, you might have very young children who can't be vaccinated, or people that have compromised immune systems that can't be vaccinated. But because a large proportion of the population, and we're talking in the case of COVID, probably over 85 to even 90% of the population that needs to be immune via vaccination before we are able to say that we have reached herd immunity, if at all. Now, in the Indian context, because currently the case numbers have come down, people feel, and what happens is that the virus basically has an ability to infect a certain number of people. And with the original strain of COVID, that number was, or what we call the R0, the transmission rate of the virus was about one infected person would infect 2 to 3 other people. But with the Delta strain, which is currently the predominant strain around the world, it's more like between 6 and 7. One infected person can infect 6 or 7 other people. So if you imagine, and I've got a little picture here that might help you understand. So herd immunity, before herd immunity on this side, we have the white sheep, the non-immune sheep that haven't been vaccinated, and the pink sheep are the ones that have been vaccinated. So as you can see, if that virus is going to be potentially, if that infected white sheep can infect another 6 other sheep, then there's a lot of sheep that it can still infect in that herd before vaccination. But after, when more have turned pink due to and become immune due to vaccination, that that infectious sheep is unable to transmit it, basically. Right. And that's what we're looking for. But although India has had really excellent rates of vaccination and the incredible numbers, we've got to understand it in the context of the entire population. So I just looked it up. The figure is actually only 10% of the entire population of India is fully vaccinated at this stage, and I think 25% is partially vaccinated. So no, we are nowhere near reaching herd immunity in India. Yes, the transmission rates have stabilized, and that's probably because during the second wave that India had, so many people got infection. So there is a level of immunity from natural infection, but that is not, long-lasting
Yeah, I think this really helps, Dr. Sandhya. Thanks for explaining herd immunity, because this all the vaccination in India has led up to less than 15% of the total population today vaccinated in India. So we are far, far away from herd immunity, like you explained. Unless until we get to a closer to 85, 90%, it is still a far destination. So we still don't have herd immunity. So-called entire propaganda about India having herd immunity, we are far, far away from that. So thanks a lot for sharing that. And it's time to give some more details about why Dr. Sandhya is here today. What is she going to help us with? And that brings me to this entire aspect of schools reopening in India. And in a lot of tier two towns in India and cities in India, schools have already reopened for middle classes, even for primary classes. And these are small towns in India which don't have a single case of COVID as we speak now. And perhaps it is still all right their schools to get restarted. But we are also talking about cities which are densely populated now in India. Cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad. Now, in these cities, we still don't have a scenario where there are no more COVID infection cases happening. Now, schools are supposed to be opening back again from the 9th of September in the Delhi NCR part of the country. Similarly, in Bangalore, in Hyderabad, Mumbai is going to take some more time. Now, what does it mean as a parent to send back your child to the school? Are you really ready for it? Is the school ready for your child? Those are aspects on which today we have Dr. Sandhya, who's joined us all the way from Auckland to help us with these questions. And let me introduce Dr. Sandhya. Dr. Sandhya is a general practitioner. She is based out of Auckland. She's also the recipient of the Global Health Educator distinction, wherein she has actually helped a lot of people across the globe to fight COVID. And some of her videos have actually helped a lot of you who are watching today. And you are already well aware about her work on Parentune and beyond Parentune. Dr. Sandhya has also been recently awarded by the New Zealand body of pediatrics with a special award which has been given only to a select few people, and she is one of the few recipients of this award. And I can go on and go on more about Dr. Sandhya, but it's been her voice that has helped a lot of us during this tough time during the pandemic, and especially her explanation of how to deal with COVID. So, Dr. Sandhya, welcome on Parentune Live today. Really excited to be hosting you again today.
Hi, and namaste and kia ora to all the parents on Parentune, and it's my absolute pleasure to join in and shed some light on this extremely important and relevant topic. I myself have, two teenage children, and every parent needs to be aware and needs to be able to advocate for their child. What risk mitigation strategies have to be put in place in order to protect them while we wait for them to be able to be eligible to get vaccinated.
Right. Well said. And Dr. Sandhya, 3 things which I actually wanted to ask you just before we get into questions. One is that this entire aspect of the new variants which are coming up, and the virus is already mutating as we know. What is a Delta Plus variant? Is it really something which is worse than the Delta variant? What does it mean for parents and children today? And also, if you can talk a little about what can we look at from a point of view of schools reopening and this new variant coming in the air as well. If both were to happen together, because we are also now in India getting closer to the festive season, and then schools reopening almost the same time. So if you can first talk about a little about Delta Plus variant and the new variants which keep coming, it would just help us understand this better.
Well, yeah, that I think if 2020 was all about the pandemic, and 2021 is all about mutations, and we've seen that the Delta variant wreaked so much havoc in India. So I'd actually like to start out by just pointing out to everybody one very important fact, that viruses can't mutate if they can't replicate. And that is the underpinning, thing that we need to understand, is that your virus, which basically, looks something like this, there's probably 10 million virus particles in one drop of seawater. It's basically got a protein shell with these protein spikes. Inside, it's got one strand of RNA, and it's got a fatty envelope. Now, RNA, the genetic material it uses to replicate, is very unstable compared to DNA. So the more opportunities that this virus has to replicate inside hosts' bodies and that are infected, it basically, when it replicates, it makes mistakes. And some of these basically survive because they are better at, replicating and infecting, and then infecting more people. And so this is what happened with the Delta variant. And as I just explained, the original Wuhan strain, which basically would infect one infected person, would then go on to affect 2 or 3 other people. Now we're looking at numbers of 6 or 7 by one. And those people who get infected with the Delta variant are having 1,000 times higher viral load, as in virus particles they're emitting, and which is why. Now, why is that happening? It's because that virus is basically sticking stronger. The spike proteins are sticking stronger into the receptors along our eyes, our nose, and our mouth, and in other parts of our body, and they're infecting more deeply. Now, this Delta Plus variant came up in India. I mean, there are many different variants that come up that people keep on looking at. It hasn't gone on to become a dominant variant, but that's sort of immaterial, because there are one of the biggest lessons about this pandemic is that we are all linked, no matter where we are in the world. Like at the moment, New Zealand is in a lockdown because of a Delta wave. So is Australia. That variant started in India. Similarly, other places in the world where there is, just unchecked spread going on, more mutations can occur. And Delta may not be the worst variant we are yet to see. In fact, just yesterday, I think there was reporting out of South Africa that they've detected a new variant called C1.2, which is supposed to be even worse, potentially, than Delta. So in terms of the relevance for parents, it means that if you have a virus which is even better at infecting, then all those risk mitigating strategies, which initially we had, washing your hands, watching your distance, wearing a mask, and now watching ventilation, becomes even more important. And what we always understood was that each layer or each different defense that we have, none of them is bulletproof or on its own. So we had this Swiss cheese model that was made, because basically, even if you have multiple layers of defense, sometimes you will still get somebody that's infected. But the more layers of defense that we can, protect ourselves with, the more we can increase our protection. And that is relevant for school children going back. We need to protect them with as many layers as possible to reduce their chances of, first of all, getting the infection in the first place, and if they do get the infection, to make sure that that viral load that they take in is much lower, because that means that whatever infection they do get, if they do, will be less severe.
Right, right. And in that line, now with the schools reopening, there's almost like a confusion and a lot of anxiety among parents. And we recently did a survey. I would like to share with all of you the survey results. So we asked 4 questions, and one of the first questions we asked was that, is your child already back to school, or is your school now ready with a date for back to school? And majority of the parents, especially in the metros, now have a date for the opening of the schools, and that is what is causing a lot of confusion and anxiety now, whether the schools are ready or not. What do I need to do as a parent? How would we manage the entire situation? And those are the kind of questions. Now, the second question which we asked, and the answers have been interesting, is that would you send your child back to school without vaccination? And although 100 plus parents have taken it till now, not even one yes. So very clearly, parents have given a verdict that unless until there's vaccination, they are not comfortable in sending back the child to the school. Now, while we understand that, the next question was about do you know if your school is ready? And the answers which we are getting is actually that we don't know what is it that will get the school ready for my child. And I could be self assured or I could be fine sending my child back to school. So, Dr. Sandhya, that brings me to a question which everyone has right now. What do schools need to do to get ready? What is the preparation or readiness that schools need to have to be ready for back to school?
Well, that's a very good question, Nitin. And thankfully, this is one area in which the CDC guidelines from the USA that came out about a month ago actually had a very comprehensive guide suggesting what risk mitigating factors that schools should be putting in place in order to protect the children. And basically, the reason there is confusion is because all over the world, we're seeing, whether it's in USA or Europe or even in parts of India or parts of the world where schools are going back and you're seeing bad outcomes in children, that's because there is no consensus. Not everybody is following. In fact, the vast majority are not following best practice. And what we are seeing as a result of that is, exponentially increasing rates of infection in children. Who are, the largely unvaccinated proportion of society now. So, I mean, for people to ask, are children going to be affected more? 100%. Because if we've shielded our children at home up till now, but then all of a sudden now we're going to send our children back to school unvaccinated, when we've got even stronger circulating, viral mutations, of course they are going to get affected. So this diagram actually quite well summarizes the CDC guidelines. And I think one of the biggest things that parents need to make sure is that the school has a mask mandate on, because masking is one of the most effective tools in this entire pandemic. Even in the absence of vaccination, it's a highly effective tool if used properly, universally. That means by everybody in the classroom, the teachers and all of the students, to decrease the chance of inhaling COVID aerosols. And as we know now, that the main form of transmission initially in the pandemic, it was all about droplet spread. And so we had the droplet spread is the large particles that we emit when we cough or sneeze. So we were told to cough in our elbow, and the wearing of the mask was to try and block those particles being expelled and infecting somebody else. Now what we've found is that and then some of these droplets rest on surfaces and people can pick them up, and then if they touch their eyes, their nose, their mouth, they can infect themselves. And that's why we had the washing the hands for 20 seconds with soap and water or alcohol to get rid of the virus particles and prevent them entering. But with all the super spreading events that we've seen, and the fact that a lot of the people that are spreading the virus are actually asymptomatic, 50% are asymptomatic. So they're not actually coughing or sneezing, yet so many people are getting infected. How? That's because when we are just talking or even just breathing, we emit a fine spray, which looks something like this sort of fine spray you can see from this, can. Or what I would say is a good way to think of it is like cigarette smoke. Everybody's breathing this invisible cigarette smoke that contains viral particles or aerosols, and they are usually less than 5 micron in diameter, as opposed to the big droplets, which are greater than 100 micron in diameter. Now, with these little viral aerosols, they can travel more than 1 to 2 meters, and they suspend in the air and float in the air for hours. So even if you enter a room that is empty without wearing a mask, that room may have a lot of COVID aerosols in there. So ventilation and basically the movement of these COVID aerosols is highly dependent on the airflow in that room, and ventilation, good ventilation with opening the windows and allowing outdoor air to dilute the indoor air and reduce the viral load of that room is incredibly important, as is filtration. Now, another tool which a lot of schools are using and is this thing called CO2 monitors. And we've got a picture here of this traffic light indicator CO2 monitor. Now, CO2, carbon dioxide, is what we emit when we exhale, so when we breathe out. And that can be used as a rough guide to try and make people understand how high the viral load is inside that enclosed space. And what we are aiming for is CO2 reading of less than 800 parts per million. So as you can see on this, traffic light monitor, it's green when it's under 800. If it goes into the, amber or the red, it means that you need to open the windows, you need to allow outdoor air in to bring that CO2 level down, and that will reduce the risk. So all these tools, and these are being used in a lot of countries in Europe and in America. They're readily available. I think even in India, some of the air purifiers actually have a CO2 monitor on them. And they basically mean that we're not entering that room blind. We know, like if the teacher has that on the wall, they can see, oh, sorry, the CO2 level's going up, we need to do something about it. Now, the HEPA filters, I mentioned that the particles in the aerosols can be less than 5 microns. These HEPA filters are effective at filtering 99.97% of aerosol particles greater than 0.3 microns. So a combination of using a HEPA filter with masking and having the CO2 monitor, there, and having, a good ventilation with outdoor air coming in, significantly reduces the risk of your child, anybody in that enclosed, or the teacher actually getting a viral dose of the virus that will lead to an infection. And the other thing is, vaccination is really important. I mean, the children who are not eligible to be vaccinated, if all of the family members 18 and above who can be vaccinated in the family are vaccinated, and all of the staff that sets foot on the school campus are vaccinated, that will reduce the risk to the children. I think just last week there was reporting of a case in California where a teacher who was unvaccinated and went to school sick, although there was a mask mandate, she took her mask off to, read to the class. And I think the children were wearing masks, but she managed to infect 12 out of the 24 kids up to 5 rows back. So I think the kids didn't have a severe infection. Maybe that was possibly helped by the fact that they had masks on. But the point is, it's very difficult to get to zero risk, but a combination of these factors can significantly reduce the risk, as can reducing the duration of time spent indoors. So as this statistic says, a study showed the use of masks without air cleaners reduced aerosol exposure to the receivers by 72%. The use of air cleaners alone, so your HEPA filter without mask alone, reduced it by up to 65%. But when you use them together, you combine the air cleaner and the masking, we were able to reduce that exposure to the respiratory aerosols by up to 90%. Now, that's not 100%, but that's, pretty good. I mean, that reduces our risk and makes us feel a lot better. In fact, this is not new. I mean, we've been through the Spanish flu 100 years ago, and in the early 1900s, to combat TB, they had these open-air schools and this open-air schools, movement started in Europe and spread to the US. And in fact, at the time of the Spanish flu, they introduced large open-air classes. They did outdoor education. They introduced school nurses to do health checks on children. And they found they were able to keep the infection rates lower in the school environment than in their home environment because it was much cleaner. And this is the way forward, because this pandemic's going to be around for a while. As we said, that there is a new variant, 100% there will be more variants that come. And that's why we all have to do our bit to reduce the spread. And having improved air quality inside classrooms is good for learning, and it's good for preventing all sorts of respiratory illnesses. So, so I mean, these are really important things that parents need to check that the school is looking at. How many kids are going to be in the class? Are they going to be staggering, break times? Are they going to be having the meals outside? Are the masks going to be necessary inside and outside? All of these things are really, really important.
So these are very important points, like you pointed out, Dr. Sandhya. One of the challenges which we have in India is we still don't have vaccination for 12 to 18, and there are still trials going on, and nobody knows by when will we completely get to it. From the data we have, the second phase is almost getting over, but it's still some time away. Now, the challenge or the worry here is that from the forecast, it looks like October is when the next wave is going to be there. And schools are reopening now. And none of the children are vaccinated. None of the children under 18 are vaccinated. And the schools are opening for the entire middle years of learning. Now, given that, given no vaccination, what are some of the things which become very important? You spoke about vaccination. Now, for the child, the vaccination is ruled out, but let's say the family is vaccinated. Is that really a good starting point? What if teachers, students, between the teachers, students, or teachers and the school staff, is there something like a mandate that unless until you are vaccinated for both the vaccines in India, you can't enter a classroom or you can't be in the school premises as a school staff. Those kind of. So those are also now coming and doing the rounds, and schools are starting to bring that in. Now the big challenge in India is each classroom, the minimal numbers are 20 in a classroom. 20 number of children. The point which you were saying, how many children and stuff.
Yeah.
And most of these schools in urban India, they don't have air filtration and ventilation, the kinds which we were talking about. And it is now crucial, given the COVID, environment. It is crucial to have ventilation and, like you said, air filtration. Now, what can one do? And if you can talk about some practices which schools can adapt or do at a classroom level, and then beyond the classroom, what are some of the things which schools could do? Because there are some teachers also watching today, there are some school principals also watching today. So I think that would really help.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, you asked what parents can do. And I think we need to go back and remember that this is the infection triangle that we're looking at here, where we have basically, the virus, as I described, the host, which in this case is our children potentially, and the environment which we're looking at, which is the school. Okay? So these are the three risks, these are the three parties at play in, this sort of infection triad. Now, if you're looking at what you can do to reduce the risk of your child becoming sick, number one is that your child should be in optimal health. And, our immunity, our personal immunity is still our number one defense in fighting any infection. And so it's important that if your child has any chronic medical conditions, whether it's, asthma, diabetes, or, even if they don't, those chronic medical conditions should be well controlled. All their childhood vaccinations should be up to date, because you don't want to have them having a, co-infection with with COVID. And, they should be eating well, healthy food. They should be well. We've got a lot of children which, unfortunately, they're overweight, but they're actually malnourished because they are not getting adequate, vitamins and minerals through a healthy diet. There's far too much processed food. So improving their diet, making sure that they're eating and sleeping well, that they are, moving and loving more, meaning that they are staying connected with their loved ones, and that they are, staying calm. So that's the number one thing I would say that parents can do right here and right now, ensure that their kids stay healthy. The very important thing I would say is educating your child about the importance of masking and making sure that they are very familiar with masking, and using this time to invest in a very good mask for your child. So as I explained, whatever mitigation strategies we were using at the beginning of the pandemic, now we have to improve them. We have to improve our weapons even further. So where before your surgical mask, now even the surgical mask, as this diagram shows, for children, and I think Nitin's going to include all of these on the Parentune website for people to be able to access, that not all masks are created equal. Any mask is better than no mask. But you can, you probably would have heard of double masking, which took off in the US, and that was the practice of putting on a surgical, like a disposable mask, and then putting a cloth mask over the top. Because as you can see, these surgical masks have a lot of gaps, but putting another one over the top, a cloth mask, basically meant that it was a tighter fit and you were getting rid of any gaps. There is also simple mask, hacks where you can just sort of tie the loops of the, of the ear loops and fold it. And I've got that video also on my YouTube. These are simple things for children's faces, and ideally there should be a nose wire. And, if possible, the child should be wearing some form of eye protection is ideal if you can, because as I said, as many layers of protection is good. Now, ideally, KN95, or what it means by the N95 or the KN95 means that they are good at filtering up to 95%, or in some cases 99% of aerosol particles, whereas these ones were mainly designed, your surgical mask or your cloth masks were mainly designed against protecting for droplets, but not, those small aerosolized particles, and certainly not with any gaps. So I think, if children are uncomfortable, you've got to sort of explain it in that context. For example, if you're an astronaut going to the moon, you're going to wear your spacesuit. Unfortunately, in these times, and a lot of the children, that's all they've known for the last few years, they actually adapt very quickly. And then make sure you have enough of them. Like for my children, I made sure that in their school bags, they had their sanitary COVID pack ready, where they have, their masks, their pack of masks, because you need to say if it's wet or soiled, keep a separate plastic bag where they can, if there's a disposal place at the school, they can dispose it. They have their, sanitizer ready. I also put a little bit of alcohol in a spray, or, some alcohol wipes, so that they can clean their devices or anything. These are just simple, practical things that you need to empower the child to feel like they can manage themselves, because this is the ongoing reality that they're going to have to learn to basically look after themselves and live with it. Teach them that the masks is like, an underwear. You don't share it. You come home, you wash it. You keep your school uniform in a special place, and you get changed. You wash your hands as soon as you get home. Keep your school bag separate. Make sure that you're washing your hands before you have your food. You're eating anything, and that you're eating outside, and only taking your mask off when eating. So all of these things, I think, are very important for parents to educate the kids. The other thing is, if your child is sick, then you need to keep them home and get them tested for COVID. Do not send them to school. Similarly, although the parents and the family members are vaccinated, they can still get breakthrough infections and then transmit it to their children. So it's important that the vaccinated parents are also, if they are, out and about with people that are outside their bubble, and they're not aware of their vaccination status, that they are wearing masks as well, so they're not coming home and infecting their children. So there are a lot of, things to think about, actually. And there are a lot of ways when the child is being transported to school. You've got to make sure that if they're going in a car with somebody else or a bus, that the windows are down on the bus. If there's aircon in the car, that you're not recycling the indoor air, that you're bringing in outdoor air. Same with air conditioning systems, in buildings, that they bring as much outdoor air in. I mean, it's a simple changing of the setting that people may not be aware of. The other important thing is the use of bathroom facilities, because these aerosols are also present in, fecal aerosols. So when people use the toilet, it's important that the toilet is flushed with the lid down, that there is good ventilation going, in the bathrooms as well. So yeah, there's a lot of things. It sounds a bit overwhelming, but it's all very well summarized in those CDC latest guidelines for school reopening.
Thanks, Sandhya. And these, while we talk about these, I actually want to also talk about something which, between me and Sandhya, we've been discussing. So here's the case study of Scotland. You will see it on your screen now. And I'm just going to talk a little about it, and then Sandhya, come to you with a question related to this for India specifically. So if we look at these numbers, and if we see what's happened in Scotland, you can see there are schools which reopened in Scotland. And if you see on the left hand side, the moment the schools were reopened in Scotland and the restrictions were lifted, you can see the number of COVID cases going up almost like a vertical arrow. You can see it here. You can see the arrow here. And look at where they were when the schools were closed, right? And if you look at similarly, what happened after that, after July, when the schools were closed, when July began, schools in Scotland were closed. Look at the number of infections going down. The curve went down. The other data in Scotland shows that most of the infected age group, in terms of proportion of age group, was younger age group, which is, you can see 0 to 14, 15 to 19, and 20 to 24. And what that brings me to, Dr. Sandhya, is the question which is highly, highly relevant for parents in India right now, which is that schools are reopening now in India, right? And unlike Scotland, which had some kind of readiness inside, and they had some kind of infrastructure going on in terms of ventilation, air filtration, COT monitoring. In India, all of this is still going to get discovered, and Scotland went through it to learn. US is going through it to learn, and now they are implementing those things. For us, this is going to be the first time, because schools have not opened throughout COVID in these cities. So what are some of the things which you would advise parents given this scenario, and what can we do, or what can parents actually ask schools to do? What can we push for as parents, as families, and not push for just from a facility point of view, but this time from a safety point for the child safety. So what are some of the things you would say are going to be most important to push?
I think the most important thing, and I think this is already mandated in India, which has been a big issue of contention in parts of different states of America. I think the number one is probably masking, and that needs to be universal. Anybody who sets foot on campus needs to be wearing a well-fitted mask, and so you need to find out what are the procedures, around the masking. So I think masking, ventilation, and vaccination are the three key areas. I mean, included in ventilation is filtration. So when we talk about ventilation, like I mentioned, you need to really see, has the school thought about, is your child going to be spending a lot of time, in an enclosed space with a lot of other children? And what, has the school looked at what the ventilation is like in that classroom? Have they investigated it at all. And one of the things that has come, because of all this, problem happening in different parts of the world, I think New York State's about to open their schools, and I think they're pretty much trying to go gold standard according to the CDC guidelines. And they're ensuring that every classroom has at least 2 HEPA filters, that everybody who all the staff, it's mandated that they must be vaccinated. Everybody has to be wearing a mask indoors and outdoors unless they're actually eating. And even in cafeterias, whatever, high risk activities like, exercising, or whether it's singing or playing instruments, I mean, they should be outside or, even virtual or not done. Because, the louder the volume of the people talking, the more the aerosols that you more smoke, the more aerosols that you generate, the higher the viral load of the room. So the other thing, the movement has happened because these filters have been found to be quite effective, but not everybody can afford a HEPA filter. There's an engineer that came up with this thing called the Corsi box, where you can basically, like that Indian term jugaad, you can make up your own. And so parents and school kids and teachers are getting together and they're using, just a box fan and these MERV filters, 1 or 3, and just with cardboard, they are creating these Corsi boxes, which are basically as good as a HEPA filter. And, there's guidelines online of, where to place them in the classroom. And, you're making them for about $55 to $100 US. So parents are grouping together and getting together and making these, and they are finding that with the experimentation that these are actually reducing and cleaning the air. So I think we've got to shift our thinking from, I'll send my kid to school with, 20 bottles of sanitizer, and that's the entire of the school policy, because it's now you've got to shift your thinking into sanitizing the air, because the infections are occurring through aerosol spread. And yes, it is important to use all the others, but there is, unmasked, if 2 people are sitting in a room, even if they're masked and they're sitting in an enclosed space, they can still get infected. So you need to add, like we said, opening the doors, opening the windows, and diluting that indoor air with as much outdoor air as possible, placing fans strategically at windows, ventilating the classrooms for at least a couple of hours before the children enter, so that they're not coming into stale air in a classroom. So, these are all very simple things. We have the technology, these CO2 monitors, they are not that expensive. Parents can look at, crowdfunding, getting a device for the classroom so that, you're not going blind. You're at least seeing that, okay, we are monitoring, we are doing whatever we can to reduce the risk of those aerosols infecting our children.
I think that's a very valid point, because it's no more a time to essentially play the wait and watch kind of policy, especially if you're sending the child back to school. And like you said,
I think Nitin, I think you can't have magical thinking. I think a lot of people in India are thinking, and this is the same thing that happened before the second wave, is that, acha, we're okay, we've dodged a bullet, and then look what happened. How is the Indian child more immune than the child in USA or the child in Europe with Scotland, who's gone back to school, and we've seen, exponential growth in cases? Of course, for one, we know that Delta is affecting younger people more. It is causing twice the number of hospitalizations in unvaccinated. And you are going to see a rise in children because they now are the biggest group that is unvaccinated, purely because they're not eligible. So as a parent, I think we are being put between a rock and a hard place. I mean, here you've got vaccines potentially coming out within the next 6 months, and you've managed to shield your child for 18 months. So now why you would understandably question. In fact, I did a similar survey on my social media, and 100% of parents weren't happy. to send their kids to school. But when I asked them if we added in ventilation, filtration, mask mandate, and vaccination mandate for staff, they said, okay, yes, maybe. So yes, there are tools. We should be using every single tool in the box to try and reduce the risk to our children.
Yeah, that's true. And like a network, like truly the Parentune way, as a community, we help each other. I think it's time to also collaborate for parents to get together. To give a beautiful example of how parents in New York and UK are crowdfunding, raising funds to get HEPA filters inside the schools. Maybe some things would be done by schools, but parents can also come forward and do these stuff.
Yeah, look, this Corsi box is, incredible. I mean, people are just building them. Kids can build them. It's so simple, and it's so alongside the Indian mentality as well of, jugaad. You can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. The
It's just
analogy which I
box, cardboard, a box fan, and even one MERV filter is better than none, and 3 is ideal.
and some tape, that's about it. And I was reading an analogy on the box, and it was mentioned that if you've ever taped anything for a courier, you can make this box. So
Exactly.
it's that easy. And I think Indian parents in that sense have always taken a lot of initiative. I can say that for parents on Parentune. So I think that's a great idea to build these boxes, and we'll put this on Parentune as well. So you can look this up. Now, starting to take some questions from parents, and I think some of it is actually echoing what we've been discussing. But here's a question from Rimjim. Rimjim Nakra has a 13-year-old and a 11-year-old, and she's in Chennai now. By the way, Kerala is reeling under a lot of COVID cases already. And she's asked this question with maybe some of that worrying her as well. So she's asked, what are the pros and cons of sending my children to school? Because both of them can now start going back to school. My worry is that there is a news of third wave hitting India. And it has been, the news has been doing the round since quite some time. Now, it hasn't happened as yet. She's saying that she's in two minds and she's very concerned about their children's health. But at the same time, she feels the online classes lack that seriousness, and she's worried about their child's, learning and their future. She's saying, please guide us whether pros of sending our children to school outweighs cons, or is it vice versa? And thanks in advance. So, Dr. Sandhya, while you answer this question, you go ahead. I would love to answer from an education point of view after you give
Sure.
an advice to women. So over to you.
Well, first of all, I just want to, just take a moment to acknowledge the incredible job that each and every parent and child has done in meeting the challenges up to this point in the pandemic. And as a parent, we are, constantly worrying about, the impact this is having on our children and their future. But I just read something beautiful today. Just, a few hours ago, somebody had posted where they said, I lived through a war in Bosnia for 4 years and didn't attend school between the ages of 8 and 11. Came to Australia when I was 11, now had got a university degree, have an excellent job, that we have to look at this in the big picture. There was another study done in Australia recently where they looked at the standardized test scores they do, NAPLAN test scoring, and the difference in, the performance of the children over the time of the pandemic. And this myth that there has been a loss of learning, that children have gone backwards, is actually incorrect. Children haven't gone backwards. They haven't lost their, reading and arithmetic skills. Yes, perhaps they haven't progressed as far as they should have, but they have picked up other skills that they might not have, purely because of the situation that they've been put through. So I just wanted to start out by saying there is actually no right or wrong answer. Every parent has to make that risk assessment for their own child. If your child has, comorbidities, for example, they have autoimmune conditions, they have heart conditions, or, a cancer, or, severe asthma or diabetes, or, any condition which puts them at a higher risk of a worse outcome with a COVID infection, then, and in fact, in New York, those children are being given a waiver. They don't have to go. They can continue online schooling if they have a letter, to prove that they have these conditions. And they're keeping online schooling going for when the children that do get sick have to isolate at home. So, I think asking, your school what sort of backup policy is there a choice? Will my child be able to access virtual learning if I don't send them?
Actually, some of the schools are giving that option. So when
Yeah,
this entire talk started of back to school, these questions started coming because some of these children have comorbidities, and
yeah,
parents are worried, and they reach back out to school. So we are hearing now, although there's still a formal announcement which is pending, but schools are now considering that, and they are considering that for those children there would be either a hybrid classroom which could be
yeah.
online and offline, or it could be just completely online.
Well, that's another excellent risk mitigation strategy, which I think some schools are doing, where they're doing it on a rotation. You're in a small bubble and you only go a few days a week. And, that's a really practical thing that you can do to reduce the number of people and to reduce the number of contacts. Unfortunately, in the UK, I think they're going whole hog the other way and just throwing them all in, no risk mitigating whatsoever. So we know what's going to happen there. That's almost like a purposeful, let's infect as many children as possible strategy that seems to be at play. And I really feel for the parents in the UK. And I've seen suggestions where some of them are saying that perhaps groups of parents would decide to get together and homeschool small groups of children, which is an incredibly difficult decision to have to make as a parent. And I think that it's unfair of governments to put us in this scenario. So I think, it is a confusing time. I think that if you use every tool that you have and focus on, the masking, the ventilation and the vaccination, ideally the child is vaccinated if they are, eligible. And in a lot of countries, children over the age of 12 are eligible. So if you are eligible to get vaccinated as soon as possible. That's number one, because that's the only risk mitigating strategy that helps us when the virus actually enters our body. Another simple thing which you can do, which I brought up in my COVID home management video, is when the child comes home from school, use just a simple, saline nasal spray or dropper, and just get them to clean their nose, rinse their mouth with some salt water, brush their tongue, wash their hands. These are simple, habitual risk mitigation strategies you can do to try and, reduce viral, inhaled, exposed viral load. Not going to cause harm, and, will make you, will definitely help.
Right. While you spoke about this, a very small strategy, but goes a long way. Like you spoke about nasal sprays, you spoke about cleaning, using a brush, cleaning the tongue, things like that. All entry points and reducing the chances of exposure. Now, there are two challenges which Rimjim had pointed out. In fact, Brinda's question was also very similar. Now, I just want to talk about this aspect of online learning. Now, I understand.
Oh, just one thing before you say that, one thing I forgot, very, very important. Please make sure your child is not vitamin D deficient. There are almost 100% rates of vitamin D deficiency in India. Low vitamin D levels are associated with a poorer outcome with COVID. Please make sure that your child is not vitamin D deficient and they are getting the supplements. Talk to your local doctor, your pediatrician, and make sure that they're not deficient. That's one other very important factor. Sorry,
Thanks,
go on.
thanks, Dr. Sandhya. No problem. So, Rimjim, coming back to your question, and Brinda, you've also asked this question. Now, what is online? What is your concern related to online learning? So, let me address it in two ways. What's happening is you're perhaps worried whether your child is learning enough or is learning comprehensively from these online classes. And also the second aspect is maybe your child is also not enjoying these classes or giving you a signal that they are not able to have a learning full outcome of this. I understand that. But having said that, I think we were talking about getting the schools ready for children to getting back to school, right? From filtration, ventilation, all those aspects. What we also need to do is schools, teachers have also gone through this journey of online classes now for almost a year plus. It is going to help them now do better. What we all need to also push for is, apart from the physical infrastructure, because COVID is going to be around for quite some time, we have to start pushing for making a better online infrastructure. And I think that can happen, and if it can happen with a collaborative, approach wherein teachers, schools, and students can come together, I think this can improve, because your children are 11 and 13 years, and Brinda, your child is grade 6, so almost the same age. So I think this can improve. Dr. Sandhya spoke about how a lot of families are coming together to do homeschooling. While that is also an option, I think both can coexist, and you can help your child in terms of concept understanding between a parents group, and you can do it in a much more bubble-like, safe bubble environment, and you can still mitigate that, because like you said, whenever the next wave comes in, we will again go back to lockdown. The schools will close, online classes will be back. So I think we need to push improvement in both physical as well as online infrastructure for learning continuity as well as for the safety of the children. Now, taking a few more questions, Dr. Sandhya. One question is from Lindelwa, and she has asked this from all the way from South Africa. She's asked this question in light of what she's seeing in her child's schools and schools around in her area. So what she is noticing is that children are a little unwell, but they're still getting inside the classroom or getting inside the school, and she feels that's happening maybe because of lack of screening or adequate screening. And if one child is, as a result, tested positive from that classroom, what should the rest of the class do? Should the whole class get quarantined? Then her, next question in line with that is, what are the chances of a child contracting the virus if she wears K95 mask? I think we covered some of that, but if you can repeat that, and what measures can she take as a parent, because she is now getting very anxious and afraid given the current situation.
Hi, Lindelwa. Thanks for your questions. So one of the things which New York is planning to do when their schools reopen is that children need to do a compulsory health screening every day when they come in. And as I mentioned, in the time of the Spanish flu, one of the biggest things that helped was the introduction of school nurses to be checking on children's health. And I think it's the onus is on each parent to not send, if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's keep your germs to yourself. If your child is sick, do not send them to school. In terms of, if that child comes back positive, yes, I mean, the rest of the class should be informed and they should isolate as in best practice. But you're seeing in places in the UK where there is no plan to even contact trace in schools. So it's really beyond belief, and, doesn't really make any scientific sense at all, because, you can't work on the premise that all children get a mild infection, because maybe up to 15%, maybe even more, will have persistent or long-term, long COVID with symptoms greater than, lasting greater than 5 weeks, sometimes even longer. And there may be, long-term health effects. I was reading that children that are infected who have recovered from COVID in the US are being asked to get cardiac screening done before being allowed to return to physical activity. So it's not just the flu. It is something that we have to think of very carefully. In terms of the masking, definitely a KN95 or an N95 mask is much better at protecting, but it has to be well fitted. And you have to know how to clean that mask properly. So, for example, you would have, 5 N95 masks, and you'd, for one for each day of the week, you'd have a paper envelope, you'd label them, and you'd put them away, at the end of the day, hang them in the sun preferably, and then reuse them after, for the next week. And I think you can do that perhaps 3 times. All these things are online, but the hygiene of the mask is as important as the fit and what the mask is, because you don't want the mask to be making you sick as well. So sometimes just even a cloth mask that has 3 layers, or double masking with a disposable mask, and using those simple mask hacks, which I've demonstrated on my social media, on my YouTube as well, are actually just as good. So you don't have to panic, as long as your child is wearing a mask, and everybody in the classroom is wearing a mask. That is the best protection. But definitely, the filtering face piece masks, the FFP2 masks, are designed to block aerosols, not just droplets. So, I hope that answers your question. Again, you're asking me from South Africa, so I think each country has different rules that they're putting in place. So if you understand what is best practice, then you can then assess your school and see how many of the boxes are you ticking, and then make an informed decision as a parent, looking at your child's condition, looking at your child's learning needs. And, for example, the person in Chennai, at the moment, if the R rate is less than 1, and there's not a great deal of transmission at the moment, and there's a mask mandate in the school, they're rotating, and you go out and get some eye protection for your kid, you teach them very well, then the risk is relatively low, and you can keep on watching these figures. But the levels, what we don't want to do is that bringing kids back to school shouldn't mean that they keep yo-yoing in and out of being back at school and then back at home. So the only way to do that is by putting all of these multi-layered, risk mitigating strategies in place. And the big 3 I want you to remember is masking is a must. And I think the Indian Pediatrics Association advises it's okay for any child over the age of 2, as long as they're happy, to wear a mask. And I think I saw that another report of a teacher who's been running classes for a kindergarten, and they've been fine because they've all been wearing their masks. They understand that that's what they need to do. So children are smart and they're adaptable. So teach them, empower them. So, yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Sandhya. So, going towards the last part of this live, because there are a little more than these questions which have come up. But just before I touch that, Ria, to answer your question, if your child has missed nursery and KG, I understand your worry. But completely, don't think that online classes or no online classes, the age group of your child is such that you would need to do some bit of home learning, home education, because your child is a preschooler. So you could do a lot more with your child right now, and these are the best times. So make the full use of it. Do not worry, schools are not anyways anytime sooner going to be open for primary or preschools. So this will continue. So continue homeschooling your child, and we'll do another live on this. So we'll take that question there. And going back to Dr. Sandhya, if you can tell us, what are some of the don'ts which we need to watch out, all parents need to watch out, while this back to school drive has already started? What are some of the things to watch out?
I suppose, because I've told you the do's over and over again, so the don'ts are pretty clear. You want to make sure that your child is being well looked after. Their health, their risk profile. That the school is not. Like I said, I gave you the example of the teacher in although the masks were mandated, she took her mask off to read a story to the class and infected half of the classroom. I mean, you need to make sure that whatever the rules are, they're being followed, and that and as I said, making sure that your child is in peak, condition. And the don'ts is definitely not sending your child to school when they're sick. One of the things I also read is because in the UK they're no longer allowing schools to contact trace, parents are setting up WhatsApp groups so they can inform, if one child is sick, who they've been in contact with. I mean, parents are a very powerful group because we're all driven by the one, overwhelming desire, and that is to protect our child. So, together we can actually advocate and achieve quite a bit in terms of, I think that it's up to the parents to dictate to the school, this is what you should and shouldn't be doing to endanger my child. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
It does. It does. These are very good don'ts. One is don't flout the rules. Second is if your child's immunity levels are low, that's a watch out. You need to work on that. Comorbidities is a no, like you said earlier. And that is something which is getting allowed now by schools as they are announcing, and they're giving an option to parents.
And you don't do anything to somebody else's child that you wouldn't want them to do to you.
Yeah, sending the child when they are sick to school is a big no.
I mean, you teach the child. I mean, it's not just to protect you; it's to protect everybody else in the classroom because you don't know if you're infected and spreading.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some of the don'ts you would advise to schools? Because teachers and some of the school principals may be watching this. So, what are the don'ts for schools?
Don't ignore these recommendations. Take them very seriously. We have the technology. It is inexcusable not to actually use it because they are cheap and it was done 100 years ago already. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't, all it takes to teach a child is a teacher and a student. What we want to do is make sure that this environment that we're exposing them to is the least risky environment. So your classroom, so at the moment, it's been like, we've kept the child in the trenches away from, at home learning. Now suddenly we're putting them out into an environment where it's raining virus bullets. Our goal is to make sure, and, school has the obligation not just to protect the child, they have to protect the teachers. I mean, they are a precious, precious resource. If the teacher is sick, who's going to teach our children? So mandating that the teachers should be vaccinated, that they're aware that they're keeping their masks on, that that they're looking at these things like the CO2 monitor, and making sure that they are not doing any risky activities like singing or physical activities in the enclosed spaces. That is happening outdoors. And all of these guidelines are available. CDC has come out with quite, comprehensive guidelines about school safety. You need to be looking at them and implementing as much as you can, and doing whatever we can, to reduce, class number, class sizes, and rotating and minimizing risks of interactions.
Fantastic. Those are amazing don'ts and do's today. Dr. Sandhya, it was amazing. I think you've thrown a lot of light, and this will help all the parents. To the parents, I would just like to share that Dr. Sandhya's live is going to be available on Parentune at any point of time. Make sure that in case you missed the initial parts, she's covered a lot of things really comprehensively, including how can you prepare the child, how can schools be prepared, and what does all of this means. And she's explained this again really nicely with examples, with some resource material. Do go through the video. Also, these all the questions which have been taken, they are all available in live, so you can learn from other parents and their questions. Dr. Sandhya, again a privilege, and such a great learning for all the parents today. Any parting thoughts, any concluding thoughts you would like to share with parents? Because I mean, everything helps right now.
I think, I just would like to say to you that as a parent myself, I 100% feel, what complete anxiety you're going through. And in terms of my whole attitude to this entire pandemic has been that if you inform yourself with as much knowledge as you can, and you keep one truth in your mind, and that is prevention is better than cure, especially because there is no cure. Prevention is the cure. And that there is a lot we can do to reduce our risk. And if you, look for it, the information is out there. Use your voice, advocate. Your child is unable to, they're relying on you. So do whatever is in your power. Do not use magical thinking. Do not think that my child is immune and India is immune and we're going to go back to school and we're going to be fine, because yes, the majority of children do have mild illnesses, but who's to say that your child won't be that statistic? That one person that had the bad outcome, that had the multi-system inflammatory syndrome, which can even happen after an asymptomatic infection, or end up with long COVID. This is their future. We can't play with it. So we've shielded them up till now. We've done a very good job, and now it is beholden upon us to keep shielding them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sandhya. I think this has been extremely, extremely valuable. The advice you've given goes a long way in keeping children safe as they step out or they don't. We'll see what happens. And eventually, each parent will need to decide what is right for the child. Having said that, there's a lot of goodness which we've got in this live. There's a lot of detailing which you've done. I think that is all going to help parents decide what is right for their child. So thank you again, Dr. Sandhya, and hope to see you soon. Thank you again. Namaste, Dr. Sandhya, and namaste to everyone.
Namaste, parents, and thank you so much, Nitin. It's always, always, always a pleasure to be on this live with you. Take care, everyone.
People are isolated at their homes, and generally the people are living in a nuclear family, so they don't have people in the family itself to interact.
But a 14-year-old will question you a lot. Here, it is very important as parents to first build a connect with the child. Start looking at all the positive things that your son has done.
I think Parentune has this wonderful concept of called Parentune Live workshops, where they understand that what is that they are undergoing.
So it is very important for child to listen a lot.
इतना समय हम इस पे बिताएंगे, इतना समय ये करने में बिताएंगे, थोड़ा बहुत ये स्ट्रक्चर लाना बहुत जरूरी है.